Hi there and welcome to a new episode of the Transfer Talk podcast. It is me, Dharmesh Sheth, once again. Pete Graves still sunning it out in Florida or wherever he is. We have lost track of the man himself. I'm pleased to say we are joined by a man making his debut right there. Jacob Tanswell, Aston Villa writer for The Athletic and making a long-awaited comeback. We've missed you. Sam Tighe from ESPN. Jacob, covering Aston Villa, quiet window so far there.
Yeah, it's typical Aston Villa, really. Best laid plans, quickly pivot, and they just end up always signing someone that needs a little bit of love, and they've had that in Alejandro Garnacho.
Yes, we will come to that in a moment. Sam, we've missed you, as I said before. When we last spoke to you, England were on their way to winning the World Cup. Didn't quite happen.
Didn't quite happen.
No.
I made a joke last time I was here that this is my seat and it has my name on it. And from the moment I made that joke, I was booted out for I missed two episodes. It's like producer John took offence to that particular set of ownership that I placed on this chair.
I did have a word.
You did? It was you, was it?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll let producer John off. But yes, it didn't go well. But look, I listened to last week and Henry was talking about his anger towards Thomas Tuchel. And I certainly felt the same for about a week. It took me a long time to get over it. Didn't want to talk about it. Don't want to talk about it now, actually. There's no need. But trust me, what's been said, I agree with.
Okay. Welcome back, Sam. Listen, we're going to be discussing Aston Villa's transfer window in great detail with two experts on that subject, of course. But there's only one place to start. And this blockbusting story, Arsenal interested in, Vinicius Jr. from Real Madrid. According to reports in Spain, the valuation of the player, even though he's only got a year left on his contract, is around £137 million. Sam, so let's talk Vinicius Jr. 1 year left on his contract. As I said, they want to reopen talks over a new deal, do Real Madrid. They don't want him to leave for free next summer because that is a humongous loss. But if no agreement can be reached, well, Arsenal could, I say nick in. I don't think you can nick in with £137 million and 400 grand a week wages, if that is
or more.
Or if that is the case. But if, and it's a big if, he was to come to the Premier League, how excited would you be to see Vinicius Jr. in England?
Yeah, I mean, look, Vinicius is probably a player that I don't think I ever envisaged playing in the Premier League. Probably because when a superstar rises to the fore at Real Madrid, they don't tend to go anywhere else. Or even if they do, I'd say they don't tend to come to the Premier League. Like when Ronaldo obviously moved on from Real Madrid, he went to Juventus. Luka Modric moved on to AC Milan. Like I can't really think of too many that have come over towards the Premier League, and certainly not in their pomp. Like Vinicius is 26, right? So he's right in the middle of his prime. We saw how good he can be at the World Cup, and obviously over several years at Real Madrid. So very exciting prospect. I do have some questions which we can get into just in terms of exactly how it would work and how it would mesh with Arsenal. But point blank, Vinicius is and has been one of the star names, one of the Galacticos at the Bernabeu and one of the star attractions for one of the biggest games on the planet, which is El Clasico. So for anyone to take him off Madrid would feel very, very, very special indeed.
We'll come to where he would fit at Arsenal. But Jacob, I just want to pick up on something Sam said there. This player, 26 years old, at his pomp. In the history of Premier League transfers, if, I keep saying if, because it is a massive if still, if it was to happen, where would that rank amongst the history of Premier League transfers?
I think it's got to be up there for a number of reasons. I think it shows you the Premier League's power now. I think it always used to be Premier League top players heading to La Liga because of the money, because of how popular the Premier League is. The fact that it is coming the other way, it always signals a bit of a sea change. And when you look at Real Madrid, they always feel like they're very clever. They sell players at the right time. Casemiro, Rafa Varane. This is a player, like Sam said, 26, who they don't want to sell. You think surely Florentino Perez has actually got some sort of plan behind this. Who knows if it will happen? Who knows if we'll end up signing a new contract? But the fact that Arsenal are pursuing this shows how significant and how big the Premier League is now.
So, Sam, let's see how he might fit into Arsenal. Leandro Trossard's gone.
Yeah.
Doubts over Gabriel Martinelli and whether he is going to be staying at Arsenal or not. So, simple. Just bringing Vinicius Jr. on the left.
Yeah,
Job done.
Tough break for Christos Zolis. No, he was never. I'm sure he was never slated to be the starter anyway. Someone that they can bring in and round out the depth of the squad. Fair enough, and let's see if he can step up. But yeah, Vinicius. Look, I mean, obviously he's one of the greatest left wingers in the game. Arsenal are aggressively pursuing an upgrade on the left wing in some form. Vinicius has come up as a conversation. So I think we can all see where he would slot into the team. The questions I mentioned before, and this isn't necessarily to bring the transfer down, but I do think it's worth considering. And Vinicius is one of those players, because he's so good and he is so special. He's one of the very few players in world football over the last 5 years that have been given the license not to press, not to work hard, not to track back, and not to do the defensive stuff.
That's not going to work at all.
So how does that mesh with the meticulously detail-driven Mikel Arteta? How does that work in a squad, in an environment which is built on hard work and rugged defensive ethic? And, Arsenal's left wingers aren't elite, but they work very hard. They do exactly what Arteta tells them to do, and they track back and they support. And Vinicius has never really done any of this. So it does beg the question as to how it actually works, but I guess we can maybe address those properly if it actually happens.
That said, though, Jacob, it's X Factor, isn't it? Which probably Arsenal, when they won the title last season, were accused of not having. So just get everyone else to work harder, because Vinicius Jr. is worth it, isn't he?
Yeah, it would be a diversion from the norm, because as you say, you look at Arsenal, you think they're pragmatic at times. They like the fine margins. They make sure that everyone's working in tune. So have a guy that doesn't press. Declan Rice, if he's tired now, then he's probably going to be even more tired, having to shuffle over that left-hand side every time. But yeah, it would be very interesting if Arteta tweaks the system, or he feels like he can get Vinicius to start running a little bit more. But I imagine it would probably be the former.
Yeah, I wouldn't bank on getting Vinny to run more, but I think it would have to be a tweak. And you can, in modern football, I think you can carry one player without pressing. I think it's a maximum of one, and I think PSG showed us during the Neymar, Mbappe, Messi era that 3 is far too many, 2 is arguably too many, 1 you can just about get away with. So Arsenal do have very hard-working forwards elsewhere. They've got great pressing out of Odegaard. Saka works extremely hard. Havertz is a dog up there. So maybe they protect Vinny off the ball and slot him inside behind the striker and say, just block some passing lanes. Don't worry too much about the tracking. There is always an option. There is always a way of doing this and hiding a player in the press. But I don't think it's what Arteta would ever want to do. So the point you make about the X factor is very crucial. If they're to sign him there, it basically tells me that they think he is so overwhelmingly good on the ball and such a difference maker that they are willing to make a sacrifice in terms of their MO.
Let's talk Real Madrid, because you could argue that maybe Vinicius Jr. and or Kylian Mbappe have suffered since Mbappe came to the club. Yes, his goal-scoring record is incredible, but since he's arrived, no Champions Leagues for Real Madrid, no La Ligas for Real Madrid, and you could argue as well, what are Vinicius Jr.'s and Kylian Mbappe's best positions? They seem to be ideally in the same place, wouldn't they?
I think that argument definitely held for a very long time. I would say that I don't disagree that at their best, they want to operate in pretty much the exact same position on the pitch. That said, it's important to note that Mbappe has basically just played up front for at least 1 year and has done a fine job of it. He played up front for France. For once at the World Cup, he wasn't playing off a big man. They always tried to use, Giroud or Marcus Thuram, and they always tried to get him to occupy defenders and then have Mbappe running off. That didn't happen anymore. He just played up front, and he was brilliant. And he just played up front for Real Madrid too. So those two made it work, Vini and Mbappe. They figured it out in the end. All right, it didn't yield trophies, and it didn't impact Mbappe. It did impact Vini's numbers, though, I'd say. His numbers weren't phenomenal last year, goals and assists. So maybe that's a consideration. But if he steps into the Arsenal team, he's the top dog.
That's the thing, isn't it? Top dog, because he was the top dog, wasn't he, before Mbappe turned up? Now Mbappe, aside of all of the petitions to get him out of Real Madrid from so-called Real Madrid fans, but
bots.
Mbappe's the main man there now. And maybe Vinicius Jr.'s nose has been put out of joint a little bit, but has it been put out of joint to the extent where, hello Premier League, hello Arsenal, I'll be the main man for this club?
Well, the contract talks with Real Madrid have been going for a while, so I'm not sure why that is, but with Mbappe and with Vinicius, you see Vinicius, I think he likes that pressure. He likes that responsibility. He likes the eyes on him. And it's only recently he started to really step up for Brazil, because I do feel like Ancelotti, having worked with him at Real Madrid, did build the system, or try to build the system around him for Brazil. So, like you say, Arsenal are obviously a very effective team, but he would be the overwhelming attacking superstar in that team. And I do feel he probably would thrive with that responsibility, and he would be, unquestionably be the main man as well.
An added layer, Sam, is Real Madrid's interest. Well, it's gone further than interest. It looks like this deal's going to happen. Yan Diomande from RB Leipzig. It looked like he was going to PSG. That's not happening anymore. Ideal position for him, because I've seen pundits talking about him. Yep, on the right side, he's great. On the left side is where he played the predominant amount of time during the World Cup. Does that impact what happens to Vinicius Jr.? Or can they play together?
I think Diomande is very good on the right. I don't know which flank he prefers. Obviously, he played on the left for the Ivory Coast during the World Cup, but I've seen plenty of Diomande on the right-hand side for Leipzig, because Antonio Nusa was playing very well on the left-hand side. Definitely a player that just plays either flank and is happy to do so. So you can't say the same about the other wingers, can you? I guess for Real Madrid, there you can't necessarily say the same thing for Vinicius. So Diomande is added flexibility and can fit around the other stars a little bit easier than maybe Vinicius does. He's not as good as Vinicius right now, but there's a possibility that in 3 years he will be at this level, because he looks genuinely amazing. He looks like the next true wing superstar. So if Madrid have decided that they're getting ahead of an issue, Jacob, you talked about Madrid always good at selling at the right time. Have they decided that this is the moment, Diomande fits in around Mbappe better, and that they're going to get ahead of this? Maybe. And if so, we might look back on this in 3 years and go, oh, Madrid, so smart again.
Well, what I would say here is, I know a lot of people will say that Vinicius Jr. holds all the cards here because he's got a year left on his contract, not holding Real Madrid to ransom, but they know that in 6 months he can talk to clubs outside Spain and sign a pre-contract agreement and leave for free anywhere he wants this time next summer. However, do Real Madrid hold the cards in another way because of this interest and this closeness of this deal with Yan Diomande, in that, right, if you're not going to sign a contract, well, Yan Diomande can play in your position as well. You might find your game time might be limited. They could do something like that, though, couldn't they?
They could, yeah. It's savage stuff.
Yeah. It might be self-sabotage in one way, of course, but for the sake of £100 million plus, is that something Real Madrid might be just like putting a bit of pressure on Vinicius Jr.? Either sign or you're going to go.
Yeah, and Real Madrid, they've got one of arguably the biggest club in the world, but they've got a big ego, and they always want to be the ones that look like they're in control. And optically, if you sign Diomande, you're not, having your begging bucket out saying, please, Vinicius, please stay. You say, okay, although probably behind the scenes they're making real big efforts, but showing the fans, showing the public, the media, that they are willing to potentially countenance a sale because they've got a ready-made replacement, shows that actually, you know what, you don't have all the cards. You may have 12 months left, but we've got replacements and we can fit in. And if you don't want to stay, that's fine. We'll get a good fee for you. But if you do stay, then you've got to compete as well.
If it is £137 million that Real Madrid do want, we do know, and we'll come to this in more detail later, that the Morgan Rogers saga, Arsenal weren't willing to go past £100 million, let alone 117 million. Would they stretch to 137 because it's Vinicius Jr.?
It does seem one of those anomalies where you think, you know what, he's got 12 months left, we'll pay it. It's almost like you take away the recruitment department and the scouting, you think, and your answer is just, it's Vinicius Jr. But it is odd, really, because they're only going up to set limit for Morgan Rogers. Similar happening with Ezri Konsa, which we'll talk about. They're very strict with their pricing, and they don't really exceed what they feel the valuation of a player is. But like I say, Vinicius sits in this different category where they go, actually, yeah, maybe we can do it because he's Vinicius Jr. He's a superstar.
Well, maybe he sits in that category, or maybe they do genuinely look at that and say, he's only got 1 year left. He cannot be worth 137 million. And when you consider, I know it's a bit boring on the financials, but like, You've already mentioned that he could easily cost them £400,000 a week or more. Like, he's going to be the top earner at the club. He's already on 25 million euros a year, which is roughly 400k, I think, a week. This is an almighty expensive financial package, and it just gets more expensive the further it goes up on the transfer fee. And so if it's like 137, it seems too much to me. And that's not a comment on the player; it's a comment on the contractual situation.
And you've got to look at what the knock-on effects will be to other players, high-profile players at Arsenal, who will be renegotiating their contracts and saying, well, if Vinicius Jr. is on that much, then I want to be on that much.
Yeah, and I do think Arsenal are going to face, or maybe they have started already to face this pressure, but it's going to increase. They're posting the biggest revenues in the league. They're so rich. And the players that they're starting to extend now and give new contracts to, I think we're used to, maybe over the last decade, Arsenal have not really paid the most money in the league. City, Chelsea, these guys have always blown them out of the water, and United too. But Bukayo Saka's extension, I don't know what the figure is, but it will be high. Arsenal are beginning this process now of having to pay their players a lot of money because they're very successful and they're very rich. So if Vinicius comes in and resets that ceiling, you're right, it does have a knock-on effect. This happens at every single club. And they'll have to start going around and picking up new contracts with other players who will start to look at that disparity and say, whoa, hang on a minute, I'm 200 grand less a week than this guy or whatever. Like, these things happen.
Yeah, so around 5 weeks, I think it is, until the transfer window closes. Let's see if the Vinicius Jr. saga develops. Right, let's move on, as promised, and discuss Aston Villa with two of the experts on the club. Jacob, I know you're on debut, but you've pulled the short straw with my first question, because we're going to talk, as we usually do with Aston Villa, on financial restrictions. Why?
Fun.
Sam, you're going to get involved.
So usually I have to do this. So I'm really happy you're just
yeah.
It's never off the agenda, it feels like, when it comes to Aston Villa. Why does it feel from the outside that PSR seems to impact Aston Villa more than any other club? And now they're back in the Champions League. Where does the UEFA competition fit into it all? Explain.
I think there's a long explanation, but the short answer is the reason why they have these issues every year is, well, let's go two reasons. Let's narrow it down. Villa Park is currently not big enough. They're redeveloping. The revenues are not what you'd associate with a traditional top six club, so that they're fighting a losing cause there. But then it's Unai Emery. If you remember when Newcastle were in this situation, Eddie Howe would, he might not like it, but he would go a few windows without signing anyone. Because Emery's got the keys to the castle, because he's got this total autonomy at the club, he's always pushing every single window. Really, last January before that, Villa, ideally, probably the financial guys would probably say, let's just keep our powder dry. Let's wait till the summer. But Emery's pushing all the time. We need to sign someone. We need, Donya Marlin goes, we want to bring Tammy Abraham in. How do we do that financially? The year before that, I really want Marcus Rashford. He is the player that I love. I bring him in. Yeah, okay, he might be on double our next best, but I want to do it. And because it's Unai Emery saying it, and because he's essentially got more control than any other manager in the league now, Guardiola's gone, they have to do it. And that's why, okay, he's fantastic and he's brought such success. But at the same time, you're thinking, maybe if you had a different manager who didn't have as much responsibility, they might find it a bit easier to navigate the financial rules.
We'll go into more detail about the players that have left Aston Villa, but the sales of those key players like Tielemans and Morgan Rogers, were they necessary sales because of these regulations with UEFA?
Yeah, Villa had to sell to buy, essentially, and it was funny because the Johan Manzambi deal came out before we knew about Youri Tielemans, and everyone started to message me. I thought we had to sell to buy. Why? How can we
Clearly that was in the pipeline, wasn't it?
Youri Tielemans, they had already known about it for 3 or 4 days. I think ideally they would like to keep Youri Tielemans, but they knew they had to sell. And Morgan Rogers was a simple remedy. I think they did fantastically well to get 170 million. I think they've got a lot to thank Elliot Anderson and Man City for setting that benchmark. But Villa have sold well. Okay, they signed players on high salaries, but I think over the Emery's 3 full seasons, they've got the lowest net spend in the Premier League. The salaries is another issue.
Yeah, but look, if you qualify for the Champions League 2 years out of 3, you are going to be paying your players a lot of money because you're a top 4 team in the league. You can't just have these players kicking around on 40 grand a week. I know it sounds lovely to be able to do that, but Ezri Konsa needs to be paid, right? Pau Torres needs to be paid. Youri Tielemans. These are players that have not only pushed Villa into this top conversation 3 years running, but they're players that every other team in the league would absolutely enjoy having. And so, yeah, they cost a lot. So the salary argument it's unavoidable, isn't it? Because you don't keep Ezri Konsa for 6 seasons unless you pay him properly, because he's good enough to play at a very high level, as he does, and he's good enough to be paid like it.
You mentioned Tielemans there. All summer long, we've been talking about Morgan Rogers, and the Tielemans deal just came completely out of the blue. Was that the one that caught you by surprise more than anything else?
Yeah, I think obviously coming off the back of the season, I think everybody. So I think maybe it's because Jacob's briefing everybody so well in terms of expectations. But Villa fans were pretty certain and pretty aware of the fact that there was a reset coming, a reshuffle, whatever you want to call it, because it didn't happen last year. There was like almost no activity last summer. So you talk about sell to buy. Well, if you don't sell, you don't buy. And that was Villa's philosophy last season. We'll just keep the squad together. This time it really did need to happen. Like it felt like the Europa League win was the culmination of 3 years. And it was time to draw a line in the sand and go, right, we're going to need to make some changes here. And with Rogers commanding such a fee against the backdrop of these difficulties with the UEFA finances, he's just felt like such an obvious silver bullet to the issues, such an obvious remedy, that it was the perfect time to start reshuffling. And so everyone then starts drawing up in their head like, okay, well, who could go? Who could realistically go? Who would other teams be interested in? You start factoring in, yes, quality, but also like ages. And I just don't think Tielemans really entered anyone's minds. And I don't think he was in that group of players that fans were thinking, yeah, he could go. Because Rogers, obviously, Watkins has been a conversation. Konsa has been attracting interest, mild interest, but for a while now. Liverpool, Arsenal, they've always kind of been keeping abreast of him, that sort of stuff. There were too many left-backs at the club, and that needed to change. Those sorts of things were all in fans' minds. But Tielemans, no way. And that was a big shock, I think, a big shock. And no one, obviously outside of the club and stuff, like, people didn't know about the release clause. People didn't know it would be that easy to go yoink and just take him. So that was another part of the shock too.
Fans might be shocked that it was, I think it's £35 million, right? Yeah. But if you take a step back, it was a free transfer, wasn't it? So maybe the club and the agent and the player have worked together and said, yeah, I'll come, I'll have these wages, but I need this release clause. Now, at 29 years of age, I know people can look at Bruno Guimaraes and what Newcastle United might want for a player like him for, £80 million or something is being mooted. Is £35 million a good deal all round, do you think? Or do you think Aston Villa probably could have got a bit more?
He left with Villa's best wishes, essentially. He was very respectful of how he did it. He phoned up at Unai Emery before talking to Manchester United because they had a relationship. But there was a feeling at Aston Villa that they had to give a little bit. There was competition for him 3 years ago when they signed him. And because he was a free agent, the only way they could have signed, they felt it anyway, it was to have that release clause in there. Tielemans is fiercely ambitious. He wants to play at the top level. And before Villa, remember, he was being linked to Arsenal, Manchester United. He always felt like he was in that bracket of real top club. And you've got to remember at the time, Aston Villa hadn't proved anything. Emery was about to embark on his first full season. They were about to play in Conference League. So Villa aren't where they are today. But I think
his stock was low as well at the time.
Yeah,
I know obviously previously he'd been mentioned in that Arsenal conversation a lot and the Chelsea conversation, but he'd had a really bad season with Leicester and gone down. And that worked to Villa's advantage, I'm sure.
But many clubs at the time thought that Tielemans' race had been run. He was only 26 at the time, amazingly. Yeah. Because he was captain in Anderlecht at 16, they felt like his legs were going. He looked pretty poor in that Leicester, albeit they were dysfunctional. Yeah. But you saw the way he would track back, his mobility has been exposed.
Well, I thought for the first 3 months at Villa, he looked very slow. And it was only basically from Christmas onwards that he really looked like he was in shape and kicked on and has not looked back, to be fair.
Yeah, and I think Villa felt that 35 million, okay, they could have got 45 million, but they didn't sign him. They didn't cost a penny. I know the salary was big, but they thought actually, all in all, it was a good deal. He was 29. I knew going into this summer, like it was the quiet word on the street, like Tielemans would consider here the contracts on the table, similar to Konsa, hasn't been signed. There's 2 Premier League clubs, Saudi clubs interested. Rogers goes, but then another one to supplement that. It always felt like it could potentially be Tielemans.
My question is, to the best of your knowledge, you may know or not, but was the 35 million figure clause, was it the same all the way through his contract? Was it always there?
I believe so. But it was so discreet. Even people that were close to the deal at the time told me they had no idea about it.
Yeah.
They kept it with a very small circle. I think his agent knew, director of football knew. I don't know if Unai Emery knew, but there was a very small number of people, and I think that's a credit to them as well, that they didn't start briefing out a year ago that he was available for this price.
I just remember last summer, his name came up as a potential departure because Saudi interest really rose to the fore 12 months ago, and now that I know he's gone for 35 million on a release clause, I just think there's no way that the Saudi clubs would have known that was there because they would have just activated it. Like, what's 35 million to Al Hilal? Yeah. So if that was there, I was like, why wouldn't he have just gone last year? But of course, my assumption or my guess was that the release clause was dropping over time with every year that goes by. Maybe it started at 60 and just goes by with every year, a bit like Harry Kane's reportedly does in his Bayern contract. But obviously the answer is no, it's just really secret.
and you say secret, there might have been clubs who would have come in before, but Tielemans may have decided, actually, I want to stay at Villa for now.
Yeah.
And then, 29 years of age, Manchester United come calling and maybe thought, this will probably be my last opportunity to get that big move.
Yep.
Yeah.
With respect to Aston Villa, of course.
And look at the contracts he signed at Man United. So this is why I do think for Villa, it's 5 to 10 million too cheap. So it's not a great deal for them. It's not nothing, but it's not great. But you look at the contract he's now signed at Man United, 5 years. And it will be 150 grand a week or more because Tielemans was on circa that at Villa anyway. It's going to be in that range. So he's going to get at least that much, probably more. In Villa's situation, like going not just year to year, but window to window with UEFA, they can't commit to a 5-year deal for a 29-year-old Youri Tielemans at 150k. Like, you just can't do it. So this is where the situation where it's like sign or go comes in. And ultimately, I think everybody has come out of it okay, because I look at that and go, Villa could not have done that.
You touched on it before about the Morgan Rogers deal and how maybe Elliot Anderson and Sandro Tonali, maybe to a lesser extent, Mateus Fernandes, distorted the market and maybe helped Aston Villa get £117 million eventually. Let's flip back. If we could go back in time, those deals haven't been done. What do you think Villa would have been happy with if there was no comparison there? And do you think, with that in mind, Arsenal might have a tinge of regret that at the start of the window, it probably wouldn't have been 117, would it?
Yeah, so he signed his new contract, his third in 2 years, in November. And at the time, I think a lot of us assumed there must be a release clause in there.
There wasn't.
There wasn't.
No.
And there was never a discussion on the set price of if he would be allowed to leave for the right price, but there wasn't an actual set price of what Villa would go for. And all they said, I think was quite vague, was big money. A lot, that is very vague. I think a lot of people at the time thought, and it's been reported by a lot of people, 80 odd million. Villa were always looking 3 figures. They wanted to exceed Jack Grealish. They felt Morgan Rogers was younger, inflation, they would get that. But that extra, 10, 15 million has probably come from Elliot Anderson, from everything else. And Villa would, they look at not only Anderson, but they look at Florian Wirtz. They're thinking Morgan Rogers, they rate him in the top 5 Premier League players from last season. He's got more experience in the Premier League than Wirtz. He's proven he can perform more than Wirtz in the Premier League.
Certainly had a better season last season.
Exactly. And they felt like, actually, we could potentially push 115, 120 million for him.
I think Wirtz was 116 because he beat Caicedo by 1 million. This is what everyone does, isn't it? This is just the standard.
Morgan Rogers was Elliot Anderson plus one.
So everyone's just plus oneing each other, yeah. I think Marinakis, the Forest owner, is probably absolutely furious with this because he set the record, one over what Jude Bellingham could possibly be in total. And then within 3 weeks, he's not the record holder anymore. But look, the other factor here we have to say is that obviously Middlesbrough get a nice chunk of the fee. So if Aston Villa had sold Morgan Rogers for £80 million, they actually would have gone too cheap for them in terms of what they would have received. Yeah. Borough getting 20% of the profit.
Yeah.
Is that right?
It was, but then it's capped at 15 million.
Capped at 15 million. So Villa had to go 9 figures because they're not going to get the full amount. So if you factor that in, it starts to push the price in. It just goes above 100 naturally, because if you think that Villa need to get a minimum of 80 to 90 million for Morgan Rogers, then the total figure already hits 105, 110, and then you play the game and see what happens.
Quick question for both of you, Sam. Who's got the better deal? Chelsea for Rogers, City for Elliot Anderson.
I think Anderson is a much safer deal. I much prefer to spend this much money on central midfielders, not attackers, just because. I think the expectations on attackers, goals and assists, that sort of thing, when you spend this much money, I think they just go through the roof. And I find it very difficult for those players to prove worth that figure when you play in that position.
Yeah, I think there's more unknowns with Rodgers, not because I don't think he's a good player, but the environment he's going into. You look at that front line, it's young, but also have you seen much cohesion so far? They don't know how they're going to play. Rodgers is not really a left winger. He likes to come inside. How is he going to balance that with Cole Palmer, where Elliot Anderson's going into a team? Okay, they've got rid of Pep Guardiola's now left, but they've got good midfielders around. They've got quite a stable environment to come into, where Rodgers will have to be the talisman in an environment where, as you see with signing potentially Jordan Henderson and Danny Welbeck, Chelsea don't look like they're quite sure of what direction they're heading in yet.
And we'll come to those guys in this podcast a little bit later on. But Sam, another deal that surprised many as well. We talked about Tielemans surprising people. Alejandro Garnacho, where does he fit into all of this?
Oh, yeah. So Garnacho, I mean, Unai Emery has wanted Garnacho for a while. That should be stated. That I think Villa were in the conversation last summer, or tried to be in that conversation when he left Manchester United. He was definitely brought up in the conversations that the clubs had when it came to Emi Martinez. But Chelsea obviously got him. So yeah, it continues an odd trend I found. Jake, I'm sure you've noticed this as well. But Unai Emery likes to sign players that blitz his team, and Garnacho has been a big problem for Villa over the years. Whether it's in a Man United shirt or a Chelsea shirt, he has ripped Villa to shreds on more than one occasion. I think genuinely just by the simple virtue that anyone that plays very high and very wide with pace pulls Villa's narrow structure apart very uncomfortably. So if you could just keep switching the ball to Garnacho and he can bring it down and run at Cash, the big distance between them on the touchline, because Cash stays not really narrow, anyone in that position has hurt Villa. Garnacho, it does that. So signing him is great because he can't hurt you next year. That's the first thing to say. And then otherwise, he's got a terrible reputation by the looks of the reaction to the signing. You know, across social media and across radio stations, like some of the things that have been said about him, quite horrible. To be honest. And I got a lot of messages, going, "Oh God, I'd show her," like that. But funnily enough, let's say I got 20 messages in reaction to the deal. I don't know how many it was, but let's say it was 20. 19 of them were like banter messages, basically. One was from a Premier League recruitment director who said, "Do you have any idea how close Garnacho is to becoming an excellent player? He's like this far away." There's a couple of things obviously going on, which everybody knows about. His brother's not helpful, that sort of stuff. But he is really not that far away from piecing together a brilliant skill set. And what do we always say about Unai Emery? And what did you say earlier? He loves a player like this. A player that just needs 10% more, and he'll figure it out, I'm sure. So I'm actually weirdly optimistic about this.
He likes that left side, doesn't he? He's been trying to recruit Rashford, Jadon Sancho, Garnacho. I remember when he was at Arsenal, one contact told me that Crystal Palace came to the Emirates and destroyed Arsenal. And instead of being really, really gutted about the result, he was gaga over Zaha. And he really was desperate to sign Wilfred Zaha. But because of the age profile and the price, they ended up signing Nicolas Pepe. Instead
plays
of
on the other wing.
Wilfred Zaha.
It's actually happened here because what's funny and ironic is that Villa don't usually play with a left winger. They've only changed the system once to accommodate Marcus Rashford. They usually play with a left 10 who comes in to the pockets, left back who overlaps, and the width comes from the right side. Garnacho can play on the right. He played under Ten Hag, but he's probably going to be used on the left. But what's funny is that in the recruitment meetings before the start of this season, towards the end of last season, was that the key priority was a right winger who could run in behind, who could hold width on the right. That's why Ibrahim Mbappe from PSG, Crescencio, Somerville were huge targets for them. So then they've now, a bit like Zaha and Pepe, he's flipped to the other side. Garnacho's available. Chelsea and Villa, it should be said, have a strong relationship. And potentially that could rear its head again with Nicholas Jackson, potentially towards the end of the window. But signing a player on the right or the left doesn't really seem to matter to Emery because he feels like he can get their best and he's even willing to accommodate them.
It helps when So McGinn plays right mid for Villa, but can easily just play left mid. Like he could just do whatever you really want him to do. There were times a couple of years ago where he popped up as the 10, led the press. He does whatever you want him to do. When you have players who can play 3 positions, and Villa tend to accumulate quite a lot of those under Emery, it can be easier to rearrange the furniture to put Garnacho in a position to succeed. The left wing thing is weird because he does tend to have his fullback fly all the way up on that side and the whole system tilts around. So maybe there's a change coming there. Or maybe Garnacho just plays on the right and crosses rather than shoots. These are all questions I guess we'll get answers to quite soon.
It's good you brought up Nicholas Jackson there, because that could be another potential Villa-Chelsea relationship, as they say. Let's take it all on face value. All of the players that have gone from Chelsea to Villa and vice versa, everyone has been happy with and they've wanted. Some cynics will point to a couple of summers ago when Ian Maatsen came to Aston Villa and Amari Kellerman went to Villa. And has he played?
He got injured though.
He got injured, but
he was very good on loan last year in the lower leagues.
So let's just look at it on face value.
Yeah.
There seems to be a good relationship between the clubs to be able to do business, right?
And that extends to the top level. But what I will say is that Nicholas Jackson, Emery, huge fan of him. He gave him
played under him
chance at Villarreal. I think he rejected signing more experienced strikers at Villarreal to give Nicholas Jackson a chance, and he's wanted Nicholas Jackson all the time. The pair have stayed in contact throughout, so it's not a case of any Chelsea player. Just bring us someone.
It seems the easiest deal to do, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think
not now.
Not now, because you've got that 45-day window where you 2 clubs can't sign or can't do business again after already doing something. And if they do sign Nicholas Jackson, that would probably be past the September deadline. But Villa and Chelsea, it's been described to me as they're very creative.
Yeah.
So how they do it is another thing. But also for a team that hasn't got or has got financial difficulty, as we've discussed, Nicholas Jackson would be expensive. I think 60 million.
Jacob, let me just stop you there. I might not be the only one, or I might be the only one who did not know about this ruling. What is this ruling?
So it's a 45-day period where if 2 clubs have done a deal, they can't do another one because it doesn't want to be seen as associated transactions. I think UEFA were wary of what's previously happened. Villa have obviously used that to their advantage, not only with Chelsea, but they've done a similar type of transaction with Everton as well a few years back. So to stop that, they had this window where you can't really do another deal in that period. But because obviously Morgan Rogers happened within that 45-day period, the question is whether Villa can do another one.
So basically, this is a UEFA rule. I believe this was brought in because of the nonsense that Barcelona and Juventus pulled with Artur and Nurlan Pjanic when they both transferred for like 70 million euros. Do you remember that? It was a shambles. And that has genuinely created restrictions around player swapping, player exchanges, associated deals. UEFA don't accept these deals. And if you do them, they will write down the profit that you make on these deals. So when Villa pulled off several of these deals a couple of years ago, the Douglas Luiz to Juventus transfer with Illing Jr. and Baron Achea going the other way. You've got the Everton stuff with Irabunum, with Lewis Dobbin and Amadou Onana. You've got the Kellyman and Maatsen stuff. UEFA are writing down the profits on all of these deals for both clubs because they're like, you're obviously swapping players. We're not going to allow this. Premier League are fine with it. There's no rules against this in the Premier League. And that's why Villa passed PSR and they fail the UEFA stuff. So there is a 45-day call-off period here. Morgan Rogers transferred too late in the window for the 45-day call-off period to expire before there was time at the end. And now that Villa have loaned Garnacho, they cannot loan another Chelsea player. So how they get the Nicholas Jackson deal done in this window without sacrificing the Rodgers profit, which is absolutely crucial to solving the financial problems with UEFA, I have no idea, Dharmesh. Like, it looks impossible. I mean, I'd love somebody who works at either club or specialises in these like very nitty-gritty details to explain to me how the hell this can happen.
Definitely the Rodgers deal is within that. Is outside. It's going to be outside that 45-day period.
I'm not sure it is. I think
he transferred with 44 days left.
Yeah, it was
in the
just
summer
inside
window.
it.
Yeah, no, just
what
too
I'm
far
saying
the other way.
Is, what I'm saying is, was it announced then? Because
point.
there is a chance.
This is the question.
I suppose.
There's a chance that behind the scenes they might have registered him, and got everything done
a few days earlier.
because
on the TMS system done.
For them to want to go for Nicholas Jackson, if we believe that is definitely the case, surely they're not going to have put themselves in a position where it would be impossible for them to do that deal.
Dharmesh, this is the question I'm
Surely.
asking.
Surely.
It's the question I'm asking every day. It's like, how do you guys do it? And it's always, both clubs are very creative. We'll find a way. It's almost like a little wink, like you wait until we show you.
Yeah.
But let's see if it happens first. But he is a key target. It obviously has a knock-on effect with who else is up front. Ollie Watkins, Tammy Abraham, who they're willing to listen to offers for. So all these things that could happen, this domino effect that could happen at Aston Villa is remarkable. And that's why it's just such a fascinating club to cover in a transfer window.
Yeah. So Nicholas Jackson could sign on January the 1st, by the way. No problem.
Yeah.
Would not risk the Rodgers profit. The problem is, if Rodgers had been transferred before the World Cup, again, wouldn't be a problem. Nicholas Jackson could probably sign August the 1st, whatever it might be. It's just how late it happened in the window versus how much time would be left. But let's see. Yeah, because you're right. I mean, maybe they put it through on the transfer matching system with FIFA earlier. But I saw him arriving for a medical last Monday, and I think that's too late. And I don't think they'd have put the registration through before they'd done the medical. You don't just put a 117 million deal through and go, hope he passes his medical. So I mean, again, it to me from the outside looking in, it looks difficult, nigh on impossible, but we'll see.
This is Jacob. You're coming back. This has blown my mind. You're educating me. They're like, when he's saying, "Oh, it's impossible, it can happen." I'm like, what are you talking about? 45 days. Where are you getting this from? Wow. I should have read up on that.
18 of the Premier League clubs don't get affected by this at all. There are only 3 that are 17 and 3. There are only 3 that are in UEFA financial settlements, right? Chelsea, Newcastle, and Aston Villa. It's only 3 sets of reporters. There's only 3 fan bases that actually have to understand this because it does restrict everything they can understand. So it's a very specialist subject. I think you go on Mastermind and nail it.
Yeah. Jake, I'm only a sports journalist.
You look tired.
But this is a key year as well, right? Because this is the final year for 3-year assessment window for UEFA, and Villa can only incur losses of 60 million euros, potentially 80 million with leeway. So they're getting assessed at the end of this financial year. Villa are likely to need to make a profit in this period. That's why selling Morgan Rogers was so paramount. So if that profit is affected, and that could be the difference whether they comply with UEFA or they don't.
And if they don't comply, they get banned from the Champions League, which is bad, by the way.
Yeah, that's not great. That's not great. Let's move on. I was going to say to other. It's not good news. It's just other news. There's another key player who is attracting interest. Ezri Konsa. We touched on him before. Arsenal very, very interested. Surely they can't sell Rogers, Tielemans, and Konsa in the same window. You're going to go Mick McCarthy on me, can't you?
I'll say it to Sam. Villa don't want to sell him, and they don't feel they have to sell him. They want him to stay, but
so they don't need to.
They don't. What they're saying, or people around the club are saying to me, is they don't need to. But there's a valuation for Ezri Konsa, and he's got 2 years left. That contract offers on the table. He is not being paid probably what his market value is. One of the best defenders in the Premier League consistently over 3 years, but the longer that contract's not signed, the question is, do Arsenal or Liverpool or another club potentially meet that valuation? And if they do, then Villa will have to seriously consider selling him. But it would be a big job for Emery this season with your key players, the spine of the team, potentially leaving. You can add in Emi Martinez, who Juventus are fluttering their eyelashes.
Do you think this is the summer he goes?
Still bidding 7 million euros, are they?
The incremental offers from Juventus, I don't think won them many favours with Aston Villa. Aston Villa want to keep him. I think they've told goalkeeper targets that they want and they intend on keeping him. But as you saw last summer with Emi Martinez trying to push to Manchester United, you just don't know what he's thinking.
Right. We are going to do positive news because they did make a big signing. One of the stars of the World Cup in Johan Manzambi. £59.5 million, including add-ons for that player. And they beat Newcastle United to it as well. Pete's not here. I think that's why Pete hasn't turned up for the last 2 or 3 weeks, because he just can't take any more pain at Newcastle. But is that a deal that should excite Aston Villa fans, and how do you see him doing?
Yeah, big time. Absolutely. Look, obviously everyone saw him at the World Cup. He was great. 3 goals, 2 assists. The spark in a otherwise pretty typically mundane Switzerland team. And Villa fans also watched him play against them in the Europa League final, and he's the only Freiburg player on that pitch that looked remotely close to Villa's level, I would argue. And there was a moment where he picked the ball up on the right, dribbled all the way across the pitch, all the way to the left-hand side, around Cash, and flashed such a dangerous ball into the box. And everyone kind of went, whoa. They hadn't posed any danger or any threat until that very point. So, look, a great season for Freiburg, and I must have had, again, I've spoken to quite a lot of people here, like probably over 10 or more scouts, recruitment directors, whatever it might be around the game, and the response to this deal has just been so effusive. Like everybody from in Premier League across Europe, they're just like, wow, brilliant player, what a deal. Everybody, not just Villa fans, but in the game itself as well, so excited about this player. They just think he's really something special.
Should they be as excited about the tackling machine in Joao Gomez for £38 million from Wolves? Because he was being linked with some big clubs. It looks from the outset that is a good move for Aston Villa.
I think that looks like good value. I wouldn't say he's obviously not as exciting as Manzambi, but I think it's a clever deal. I thought he was going to go to Atletico Madrid. All of the early summer rumours were that he was getting lined up for a €40 million Atletico Madrid deal. They stalled on that through the World Cup. They ended up signing Morten Hjulman from Sporting, who has obviously been linked to Man United for the last 18 months or so, and he's gone to Atleti, so Joao Gomez to Villa. I think he's a really good player. And he is a tackling machine. He's very, very mobile. I think he's an underrated passer as well. So I'm quite excited to see how he fits in with the fit again, hopefully, Boubacar Kamara, who is, need I remind everybody, Villa's actual best player.
Okay. Do Villa need any more? I think that's a silly question. I think they do. And is the money available for them to do that?
I think, again, that they're looking to move on players. Leon Bailey, who was excellent 2.5 years ago, signed his contract and ever since has had a sharp decline in form. Let's see if that happens with Hull City and there's other clubs interested. If they do that, then they'll try and sign another winger. I think Johan Manzambi was the key. He was the leading target. And we talk about Emery having this manager-led recruitment. He actually was a scouting coup. They'd followed him for a long time. And that final against Freiburg was a blessing in disguise, not only because it was a fairly, let's say, easy opposition to beat in the final, but it got Manzambi in front of Emery in a similar way that Morgan Rogers did. The reason why Emery wanted Morgan Rogers is because they had a game against Middlesbrough in the FA Cup, and Emery's analysis was like, who's this guy? I like him. And because Villa were playing Freiburg, because of the analysis that he did on Freiburg, he got convinced by the data from the scouting team, but also because of his own eyes, that Manzambi was the guy. So I think Manzambi is going to be the Morgan Rogers replacement, but they do need strengthening in wide areas and potentially in Nicholas Jackson or another striker up front if Abraham or Watkins leave.
I know the Tielemans deal is a sale, but they're also going to be missing Amadou Onana with that ACL injury. Is that another area where they need to strengthen in central midfield?
Ideally, yes. They've looked at João Palhinha from Bayern Munich. Bayern Munich would be happy to allow him to go on loan. I'm not sure whether João Palhinha's agreed terms with Aston Villa or is too keen yet on the move. But they do need another midfielder. Currently, they've got obviously Boubacar Kamara. We don't know how he's going to respond. He's only just returned to full training after another knee injury. Ross Barkley, who had his injury issues as well. Lamar Bogard, who impressed last year, but he's pure bookable profit. He could potentially be one that leaves towards the end of the window. So when you look at Villa's midfield, which has always been one of the key cogs in Emery's system, Onana not there, Tielemans, the craft of him not there, and you've then got fragilities with injury-wise. They do just need one more body really to compensate for that.
One other big departure, and it is Aston Villa and Chelsea again off the pitch, but I mean, he's as high profile as the players as this guy, Austin McPhee, the set piece coach. How big a blow is that going to be for Aston Villa losing him to Chelsea?
It shows the themes of modern football, doesn't it? I'm breaking a story.
They're about to build a statue of him, aren't they? or a mural. There's something.
The fact that he's got a clause in this contract that Chelsea have now activated just shows you that set piece coaches are worth their weight, aren't they? I don't think Villa were too happy with, and are disappointed with the decision because they've already lost two members of Emery's backroom team at the start of the summer. McPhee was a bit more of a surprise. It happened, they only got informed about it probably a day or two before the news came out. So I don't think they were too happy, but they were trying to find a replacement. But he was worth the same amount of goals as the Arsenal set piece coaches as well.
Same amount of goals as Rodgers.
So yeah, it's a huge loss because Villa okay, they weren't brilliant attacking. They often spluttered last season, but they would always be quite effective at set piece dead ball routines. So losing him with his locks on the edge of the technical dugout will be a bit of a loss.
There's quite a lot of games that I could probably reel off in my mind where Villa have been playing at home against a weaker opposition. They're sort of pootling around, they're struggling to make the breakthrough, and then a very clever free kick routine unleashes John McGinn, edge of box, curls it into the corner, 1-0, the dam opens. He became a bit of a game breaker for Villa in those scenarios where they were playing against stubborn opponents and were clearly better but couldn't find the way through. But that first goal would then lead to 2 more. And so, honestly, Jacob, I don't know if you had the same thing, but the reaction that I saw, people were more upset about McPhee than Rogers. Genuinely. And that's obviously ridiculous. But it does show you the high esteem that McPhee was held in by the Villa fan base and the concern there, I think, about being able to replace him. Because with Rogers, you get tons of money, you've got Manzambi in, and you've got scope to maybe go out and do a bit more, and you can reshape the team with that money. McPhee, you just need to find another set-piece genius. There aren't that many of them, and will Villa be able to attract one? Or do they already work for Arsenal and now Chelsea and Real Madrid and those clubs?
I do love Roy Keane when he says, why are they showing close-ups of the set-piece coach just doing his job?
That is a bit much, I would argue sometimes. But he does, to be fair, put himself right in the centre of the stage at every set-piece, Austin McPhee. He stood in front of Emery on the technical box. He does put himself in.
To coin Roy Keane, that is his job, isn't it? Because he has to make sure that everyone's in. That's his domain.
Although, what if they can hear him shouting from there, I don't know. What's he shouting? Cash! Cash!
Yeah.
I remember speaking to Cash a few years back, and they've obviously got all these signals from corners and free kicks, and Cash was often stood behind the play, and he's thinking, I can't remember that one because there's so many different routines. He's thinking, what are we doing here? And that's when McPhee will shout at him, that way you've got to be. But yeah, McPhee, like you say, he was a game breaker, and Villa, like I say, spluttered through games. But he was always key. And the fact that how many times last year when Villa would score a goal, they'd run over to him.
Yeah.
It was like his goal. They would all congratulate him, high five him. It was like McPhee scored 7th minute, 1-0. It was, so, yeah, he'll be a big loss and they need to replace him.
I think his highest assist maker, wasn't he, last season? Well, it's been an education with Aston Villa. I have to say that 45-day, I'm going to have to read up on this when
I think that's new. Do you think that's new?
I think it's been introduced, fairly recently.
It is new in your defence.
Okay. All right, let's move on to discuss some of the other big stories that are making the headlines. Let's talk Chelsea, Jacob, because myself, Sam, Pete, and every other guest who's been on this Transfer Talk podcast week after week have been saying, well, they've got to change their approach. They need to bring experience in. Well, there's one thing bringing experience in. Now they're after Danny Welbeck and Jordan Henderson. My math is correct, a combined age of 71.
Nice.
Not many were expecting this, were they?
Does feel a bit overcompensating the other way now. Is there a balance or a middle ground they need to find? We all know that they didn't sign anyone under over 24 or 25, and now they're thinking, forget that. We just need good characters in. Henderson's obviously not been bought in to play every week. He's not going to play.
Very impressive role over the summer as chief cheerleader and
he may be replicating that.
Yeah, genuinely might just be a good steady presence and stuff like that. And what he's just done for England, he might just be doing for Chelsea, which is mad. But at 36, what a role to have.
It's like the equivalent of a third choice goalkeeper, isn't it?
Yeah.
Henderson, but he probably play a little bit more. But again,
not in goal.
But is it like copying copying Brighton in a way? They always, they invest young, but then they have the odd over 34, Lallana, Danny Welbeck,
Milner.
Yeah.
Oh, so just more Chelsea copying Brighton. Not that they took their entire staff and several of their players. Yeah, cool. Yeah, it probably does make sense. But I've been calling for them to sign adults, definitely. And they have signed adults, to be fair. But also Maxence Lacroix we're expecting them to sign him. He's 26. That's what we were really asking for, right?
Yeah.
26, 28-year-olds is kind of where they need to go. And to get a few players on the top end is fine. Welbeck is a very good footballer. He's a very good footballer. So I have no issue with Chelsea picking up a player like that. Okay, he won't score too many goals, but he's really, really good. So why wouldn't you want a player like that?
Worked well with João Pedro as well, Brighton, didn't he?
Yeah, he did, yeah.
So, what I mean is,
he did, yeah.
Is that old head helping a player like that? Which I've spoken to a number of Manchester United fans when they heard this story. Why were United not in for someone like Danny Welbeck? Only because Sesko is now going to have his first pre-season, going into his going into his second season at United, wouldn't it be great to have someone like Welbeck just helping him along?
And with the Champions League on the cards as well, Sesko's not going to be able to play just every minute of every game, and the alternative right now is Brian and Bumo, which is okay, but Welbeck would have been the perfect third guy, I would say. Yeah.
Jacob, one other interesting potential transfer is John Stones, free agent after leaving Manchester City at the end of his contract. It looks like he's got a verbal agreement now with Inter Milan. Are you surprised or maybe disappointed that Aston Villa, among others, didn't think, you know what, this is a no-brainer?
I think I've got quite a good eye to see who is an Aston Villa player. And John Stones did feel like he could potentially be. So I did put a few messages out like, are you interested in John Stones? Villa are quite well stocked currently. Let's see what happens with Konsa at centre back. So they probably could have done a deal immediately. But with John Stones obviously finishing the World Cup, wanting to join a club for pre-season, he had to obviously move fast, and it's probably, if Villa were interested, it would have been too late in the day. I just think John Stones is still criminally underrated. Okay, he's got a real checkered injury record, and that's probably and ultimately the reason why he's leaving Man City on a free. But he performs well for England. He performs well when he plays consistently. And going to Italy, the history of centre halves in Italy, I think will be a fantastic move for him as well.
I love this. Earlier in the summer when we were talking about Stones, I was kind of suggesting maybe like PSG or something like that, because he would maybe be able to play like in a total football system, because he is so multi-talented, but also the strain on his body would be lessened, and he would be able to come in for 60 minutes and then dip in and come back out again. So going to Inter, slower pace of league, back three, I think he's going to have a wicked time.
Right, we discussed Vinicius at the start, Sam, and talking about £137 million valuation. Well, there's another player who appears to be a higher valuation, around £145 million. By all accounts, he wants to leave. That is Paris Saint-Germain's Bradley Barcola. Liverpool and Arsenal, both heavily linked. It looks like that he wants to make the move. Whether that's still going to be possible now that Yan Diomande might be going to Real Madrid and not PSG, and whether that's going to have a knock-on effect, we'll have to wait and see. But given his age, his contract situation, is that a fair valuation? Is anything a fair valuation?
No, nothing's fair. £145 million is. I wouldn't pay that for Bradley Barcola. I think he's really, really good, but the fact that he keeps slipping out of this PSG 11 would bother me a little bit. And I don't think PSG can turn around and say, well, he's a core member of this team, because he's actually not. He doesn't end up playing in the most important games at the tail end of the season, and he also has some pretty fairly noted end product problems. So he is not this lethal finisher off the left. He's very, very good, but he is not an elite footballer. And I think if you transferred for £145 million, this is several levels on from the Premier League stuff here with Anderson and Rogers, and it doesn't even have the Premier League tax attached to it either. I couldn't really see a deal at this level being worth it, in my opinion. I think I would go up to 100 for Barcola. I genuinely reckon they're like way over, but we'll see what the market says.
Let's quickly discuss Rodri. Jose Mourinho wants him at Real Madrid, of course. Final year of his contract at Manchester City. City clearly want to keep him, even though they've brought in Elliot Anderson. Does this have a feeling of inevitability about it? Do you feel he will end up a Real Madrid player before the end of the window?
I don't know, but I have felt all summer that he would go. It does have that feeling to it, yeah. And now it's starting to step up again after the World Cup. It's starting to look a bit more concrete on Real Madrid's end. And when that starts to happen, it usually comes down to what the fee's going to be. City aren't in the best position here because Rodri has 1 year left, and clearly Rodri wants to go. So it might be a case of 60 million, thanks very much. It would be a big loss because, wow, I mean, obviously no one needs me to tell them that he is a phenomenal footballer, an absolutely ridiculously good player. So
who say big loss, but Manchester City will say big loss. Would it be a big loss to the Premier League as well?
Yeah, because I just think he offers you something just completely different to most midfielders. He's so great. So even like the way he just tucks in his shirt and he carries himself. He's just such a graceful, beautiful footballer, really. And he would be a loss. We talked at the top of the show about it will be a sea change seeing a top player from La Liga come to the Premier League. So to see a Ballon d'Or winner go out from the Premier League, would be a loss.
Sam, final one. Let's discuss Newcastle. We discussed it in detail last week with Henry and Keith Downey, Henry Winter and Keith Downey. They've completed the signing of Aladji Bamba. It's a deal worth £35.5 million, all in, including performance-related add-ons. What are Newcastle getting? Is it a move in the right direction? Is it someone who could potentially be a game changer for them?
I'm really impressed with what I've seen, to be honest. I checked in on him yesterday because producer John asked me to let you in behind the curtain, and
Yes.
and spoke to a couple of people. And like, obviously, first of all, if you're 19 and you're playing like decent minutes for Monaco in Ligue 1, you're a particularly good talent. But yeah, he is massive, and he is very good at receiving the ball, defensive third, sorting his feet out and moving it on. Very good carrying the ball, and that the size of him just looks very Premier League proven. So I would say there are hints of Amadou Onana to Aladji Bamba, and I think, Newcastle are where they are. They're having to go early on these players. Sean Sturr, Ewan Johan, these guys they're having to go maybe a bit earlier than maybe they'd want to, because they're not necessarily competing for the signatures at the next level. I think missing out on 6 strikers last summer, missing out on Victor Munoz, and then Johan Manzambi this summer is another reminder that maybe they need to go a little bit earlier and pounce a bit quicker. I like what they're thinking with this guy. Bamba looks good.
Sam, fantastic stuff. Welcome back. And Jacob, brilliant debut.
Thank you.
You'll come back, won't you?
I will, and we can dissect how Aston Villa did or did not sign Nicholas Jackson.
Bring the rule book, please.
You know what? We might have you back in 45 days.
Perfect.
How about that? I think that would probably be fitting. But thank you, more importantly, for watching and listening. And wherever you've been watching or listening, apologies in advance for this, Jacob, if you haven't heard this. In your cars or on the train, in the wind or in the rain. Probably indoors you'd be, wouldn't you? In your house or in the shed, on your couch or in your bed, on the hills or in the valleys, in the streets or in the alleys, out for a run or maybe a walk. Thank you for listening to Transfer Talk.
And that's for sure.